For all those who blamed the captain of the ill-fated Air India 171 for the plane crashing, now comes a news development reported first here at the Mojo story that is too big to ignore. A news development that clearly points to a technical defect that mirrors what the preliminary probe report alleged had happened on the Air India 171 plane, with the caveat that the probe report, using smoke and mirrors, left space for the interpretation that the pilot of the plane, Captain Sumit Sabharwal, may have taken the plane down deliberately. This all pertains to something called a fuel control switch. After a pilot operating a 7878 from London to Bangalore recorded in his logs that twice the fuel control switch showed a technical defect and appeared to slip, locking properly only on the third attempt. After this piece of evidence has come into the public domain, it is time to revisit reports and allegations and whispers in journals like the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, which had a report just a few days ago, whispers that point a finger at Captain Sumit Sabharwal, whose aging father you see on your screen right now. The smear campaign very early on suggested that Captain Sumit Sabharwal led some sort of bizarre suicide murder mission in which he willfully and deliberately turned off or moved the fuel control switch from run to cutoff mode. Now that something quite similar took place on the same model of aircraft, and the pilot recorded it in his logs and said it was only at the third attempt that the switch locked as it was meant to, the question must be asked, what does Boeing say now? What does the AAIB say now? What does the DGCA say? What does the Ministry of Civil Aviation say? And above all, will the probe panel now re-examine the direction of its investigation? Remember, Sumit's 91-year-old father is in the Supreme Court asking for a fresh probe after members of the probe panel met him on the pretext of condolences and then told him that his son was responsible for the crash. We're now looking at our first very clear post-crash documented complaint by a pilot of a technical defect on the 7878 that pertains, he says, to the fuel control switches. The fuel control switches were at the heart of what took place, according to the preliminary probe report, when Air India 171 went down. So is it time to throw the suicide theory out of the window? And how will Boeing respond? Let me introduce our three expert guests on the program today. Captain Sharat Panikkar is with us. He's flown this very Dreamliner for 10 years plus. Good to see you, sir. Also joining us is Captain Randhawa, who leads the Federation of Pilots. The FIP is also in the Supreme Court asking for a court-monitored fresh probe. And also joining us is Professor Aditya Paranjpai at the Monash University, who's been following this case from the very beginning. I want to start with you, Captain Randhawa, if I may. Captain Amit Singh, whose Foundation Safety Matters first flagged this, even shared a demo video. Before I bring up this demo video, it's important to note that the demo video is actually from the 737. This is not a 787 video, but he put it out on social media to show what the pilot who was operating the plane from London to Bangalore actually experienced. And basically what the pilot recorded, can you please show me Amit Singh's video? What the pilot actually recorded in his logs, Captain Randhawa, was that as he very gently sort of touched the switch, it didn't lock as it was meant to. How do you see the importance of what has happened, this new fact that has emerged, Captain Randhawa? Can't hear you, sir.
The fuel control switches which are fitted on the 787 are quite akin to the ones which are fitted on the 777 aircraft. Now, from day one of the accident of 12th June, we have been reiterating that there is an electrical problem with the aircraft, which has uncommandedly moved the fuel control switches to cut off, rather than what the AIB has been giving a short script of the CBR recording in which they said that which pilot had switched off the fuel control switch. Point number one, if you recollect, Barkha, we had on our show Miss Mary, who was the Director General of the US Transport, and she also agreed that the 17th February 19 ANA flight into Osaka, both the fuel control switches moved in an uncommanded position from uncommanded way to the cutoff position during landing. Now, what we foresee that in the Ahmedabad crash, this has happened on takeoff. That happened on landing. This happened on takeoff. Now, see the fun. The third one now happens on the ground in the pre-start. When the aircraft is starting engines, the pilot has moved the fuel control switch from cutoff to run, and it has not electronically engaged, though there is a mechanical lock too, but it is electromechanical lock. Now this has slipped down. He tried it again, it again went to off. The third time he was successful and it held in the run position, and the pilot continued the flight. Now, I have shared one document with you of July 25. This was an advisory by the Boeing. If you see para 2.1, the last sub-para, and it says, I will quote, it says, immediately report any perceived looseness, missing detent, feel, or uncommanded movement of the switches during any phase of flight via the company's safety reporting system, which is the flight report book. So, going by
this is after the crash, though.
No, here I am talking about on 2nd February's incident. I'm talking.
No, sir. This advisory is from when?
This advisory came in July 25 after the crash.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
When the Air India was also asked to carry out the checks on the fuel control switches. Mm-hmm. So I'm coming to the point that if this had a problem, there was looseness, or the fuel control switch did not remain in run position, then the matter should have been immediately reported at London Heathrow to the engineering, and the flight report book, the recording should have been done at Heathrow, not at Bangalore after completing the flight.
Okay, hang on. Hold on. You are getting into why the pilot who logged this, and can we bring up the log also now and what the pilot found in his log? You are actually telling us that the pilot should have actually reported. Could we please have the logs? Thank you.
Yes.
You are actually telling us that you believe that the pilot should not have taken off from London for Bangalore without express approval from engineering. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that. It's also important to note that the plane was brought without any mishaps. On the third attempt, it did log properly. He was actually moving it to check it, because I guess pilots are now very careful after the crash, and he found it was slipping, and on his third attempt, he was able to lock it. But before I come to what this pilot should have done or not done, what are the implications for the Sumit, for those pointing fingers at Sumit? Can we just talk about that to begin with, Captain Randhawa?
Yes. Now, the fingers being pointed out by AIB, we have challenged this even in the Supreme Court. We have no faith in the AIB investigations, who do not have sufficient number of subject matter experts which could actually investigate into the seriousness of the crash. Now, we have been reiterating from day one that you must have the SMEs right after 1 week after the crash, when we had written to the Minister of Civil Aviation and the DGCA and the AIB. And we also questioned the credibility of the members of the AIB who are not in accordance with Doc 9756 Part 1, which is reflected in ICAO Annexure 13. So we have questioned that too. So time and again, if you have been seeing that in August and now recently in December, they have been harassing the family, and they are coming to a conclusion that it was deliberate attempt, as what they had predicted in the and also annotated in their preliminary report. We have been condemning that and challenging it. That is why we have been asking in the Supreme Court. We made the father agree to be a co-petitioner with us, and we went to court asking for a judicial probe for more transparency and accountability, which is, I'm sorry to say, it is missing in the case of AIB, and we keep questioning till the time we come to a logical conclusion, and not pointing the fingers at the captain that it was his fault, and that is what they are heading towards.
But I think this development, Captain Randhawa, let me just bring in the others and then I have more questions for you. Captain Panikkar is somebody who's actually flown this particular plane. Can we just, for a moment, and if we can go to the demo video, again, I want to say the demo video that Amit Singh has shared is a 737. I want to keep clarifying this, but he's just shown it to show what the pilot may have been checking when he found that the fuel control switch was not locking properly. And on the third attempt, it locked properly, and the details are well documented in his log. This plane has now been grounded. Air India has begun checks on the fuel control switches of its entire 787 fleet. We should say that a similar round of checks should be done on all of such planes across the world. There are 1,200 of them. And Captain Randhawa has also shared a Boeing advisory asking a crew to particularly look at whether there's any looseness with the fuel control switches, which is clearly what the pilot operating from London to Bangalore found. How should this change how the AAIB has been looking at AI 171?
Okay, let's just start from Amit's video.
Yeah.
The fuel control switches of the 737 MAX, I believe that's the model, is similar to that of the 787.
Okay.
That's number one. Okay, I'm not too sure whether it's similar to the 777 because the 777 came out much earlier than this.
Mm-hmm.
The second part is that the procedure for switching on the engine during the pushback and start remains the same. That you have to lift up a spring-loaded switch, move it to the run position, drop it. Now the spring pressure will push that metal down and it is held by a mechanical stop. There is no electronics involved at this stage.
Yeah.
That means there is no control that the FADEC has in the physical movement of the switch from cutoff to run. Once it is in the run position, if you examine the throttle control module itself clearly, inside the throttle control module, which is not obviously visible to anybody looking up from outside, are about 4 or 5 micro switches. Once this fuel control switch is moved to the run position, all these micro switches make contact. The function of these micro switches are multiple, one of which is to give an indication to the FADEC. The FADEC, as you're aware, is the full authority digital and engine control, the brain behind the engine and the various systems of the aircraft. Full authority digital engine control.
Mm-hmm.
Let's come to this specific incident and what you have just shown upon your screen as the entry.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, prima facie, I would agree with Captain Randhawa that if there was a malfunction of this nature, I would agree with him that perhaps the investigation should have been done out there itself and the aircraft should not have been flown. The fact that it is flown across 12 hours and is landed safely is immaterial. In my opinion, you should have investigated it there itself. The aircraft should have been grounded there itself and thereafterwards do whatever else was required. Number one.
Okay.
Number two, the fact that this switch is slipping back is more indicative of some amount of wear and tear of the mechanical part which holds it back, perhaps the force of the spring itself. Now, why this sort of a thing is happening is clearly been brought out by Boeing itself, post their the circular which came out in July. in which they asked all operators all across the world, not just on the 787, but also on the 737, to check out this particular aspect of this fuel control switch movement. But what lends itself to a great deal of ambiguity is to whether, without pilot intervention, and I am re-emphasizing this, without pilot intervention, the switch may have physically moved back from its run position. Now,
Explain that.
Okay. Clearly, the switch is designed for mechanical movement. The switch has to be lifted up physically, that is mechanically, from its cutoff position, moved mechanically to its run position, and then afterwards dropped. The spring pressure keeps that switch down, and it is also held by a mechanical detent in its run position.
Yeah.
It is designed to be mechanically operated.
Yes.
There is no fabric involved at this stage. However, the fact that this particular incident has happened on the ground at Heathrow, not once, not twice, it has happened twice.
Yes.
Indicates that the switch is not remaining in its run position, and with a slight amount of pressure, whether it is mechanically induced or whether it's the natural forces like gravity or whatever other forces, has allowed it to slip back into the cutoff.
Yes.
Lends itself to a great deal of ambiguity as to whether this could have actually happened in Air India 171's case.
Well, exactly. Yes. But it has to at least be looked at, considering, Captain Parikar, before I bring in Professor Paranjpai, considering that the probe report very ambiguously, without giving an actual transcript, pretty much made this the linchpin of their investigation, that the fuel control switches transition from run to cutoff. They gave a summarized version of a cockpit conversation without verbatim reproducing it, saying that one pilot said to the other, did you cut off? And he says, no, I did not. Considering that was the sort of heart of the report, does this not change everything?
I'll just take a minute. Just give me a minute to expand upon this. It has generally been my observation that Western media follows party/government lines. If Boeing has made a statement, or if the US government believes that this is a statement to be put out, by and large, the entire media toes that line. Very much unlike India with 300 channels, 300 different opinions. That's number one. Okay. Number two, I would agree with Captain Randhawa that subject matter experts at the AIIB do not exist. I am even doubtful if any one of them holds an AME degree. From what I can understand is that they are mostly Air Force officers. I'm an Air Force officer myself. They're mostly technical officers, and they've done the course of aircraft accident investigation. But where civil aviation is concerned, where subject matter is concerned, whether people that have actually worked upon commercial aircraft, mostly engines are the same, but those have worked upon these aircraft, and on this particular type in particular, they do not exist in AIIB. So I would agree with Captain Randhawa onto that it is a fact of the matter. And the moment something like this happens, the first thing that should have been done was to induct subject matter experts, and which happened only after a lot of prodding, especially from your channel, as to why this is missing, that they finally inducted at least one person that I know of into their expert panel. Okay. This should have been in the first place. The moment a particular type is involved, an AME of that particular type or a pilot of that particular type should have automatically been inducted into the probe.
Now, the important question now, if I may get Professor Paranjpai in, is what happens now. We have a bunch of petitions, Aditya, before the Supreme Court, and we have absolute silence from the AIB on this development, even though prima facie, to the layperson's eye and even to some expert eyes, it seems to hold parallels to what some believe took place on AI 171. Again, those were not conclusive comments, but they were made by the preliminary probe report themselves, which put its entire sort of analysis on the moving of these switches. And since then, everybody has been concerned on, did the switches physically move? Did something else happen? Maybe the switches never physically moved. Maybe there was an electric failure. At what point exactly did the rat deploy? We don't know so many things even till this date. But the very least you would expect is for the AIB to issue some sort of statement acknowledging what the pilot has recorded on this particular flight from London to Bangalore. Aditya.
Yeah. So Barkha, so first off, with regards to this particular flight, while the incident was logged and we've seen the pilot's logs clearly, at least in the photo, I think AIB would respond only if it was logged as an incident with them officially. As far as I understand, and Captain Panikar and Captain Randhawa can correct me on this, that unless it's logged as an incident that is called for an investigation, there AIB, I don't
No, but they
believe
should
is-
factor it
is
into
obliged
their
to
own
respond.
investigation into AI 171. That's what I mean.
So that is probably something that a subject matter expert on the panel ought to be able to do. See, I think one thing I should probably clarify here, and in doing so, I'm going to probably repeat what Captain Panikar has said. See, if you look at the switch movement, right, it consists of 3 distinct mechanical actions from cutoff to run. There's a pull, move, release, and lock. And that same sequence has to be repeated on the way back, which is what you see happening now with the second switch on the video. The fact that the switch did not lock in London, to me, now, again, with some caveats, looks like a failure at that third action where it was supposed to lock. So just to give the pilot the benefit of the doubt, if after those two, let's call them missed attempts for now, to get the switch to engage, when I thought about it, I thought, okay, maybe on the third occasion, he was able to lock it. And from there on, he may have just thought it's safe to fly, because from there on, if it's purely mechanical, the switch should not move back once it's locked. So again, I want to emphasize that on the first 2 occasions, it's perfectly possible that what happened was a failure to lock, not a switch that transitioned after it had locked in place.
No, so is it in
So this is a
simple
point
terms?
that's
Would
not-
it, so let me clarify this because I'm confused. Failure to lock. When you say failure to lock, what I'm understanding is somebody is trying to see if the switch is locking properly and it's moving back. It's slipping away.
It's slipping away before it's locked. So
Yes,
if you notice the action
it's
in the
slipping
video,
away before it's locked. Yes.
before it's locked,
Yes.
exactly. And so what
Yes.
may have happened, and see, we don't know this, right? The pilot may have just been able to lock it the third time around, and once it's locked,
Yeah, clearly,
it seems
clearly
okay.
he was able to lock. From what one understands, he was able to lock it the third time.
And that absolutely, and from there on, again, if you have to move the switch back from that position, it needs to go through that entire sequence of lift, move, and release. So in that sense, I suppose you could give pilot the benefit of the doubt here and say, okay, once he's able to lock it, it seems to be okay. And I think that's also what I suppose Captain Panikar was trying to hint at, that it's a series of mechanical actions. And the other thing I should probably point out here is, if you look at that report itself, that yellow colored document where the pilot registers it,
Yeah.
you notice that on top, that's remark number 2. The first remark that he makes is the aircraft veering to the left, right? That has incidentally, I don't think it has anything to do with this locking mechanism, but when I looked at that report, it occurred to me like, okay, he's put in all the details, but it's possible that he didn't think this was such a major issue, because he thought veering probably was something that to report first. So he reports it, and then he puts this in saying, look, this has also happened, by the way, on this airplane. Look, I could be wrong, but to my eyes, when I read those 2 lines, that's the sense I came back with.
Okay.
And consequently, so he's put it in the system that, look, this has happened. But also, let's not forget that at this point, we are still in the shadow of AI 171, in the absence of a released report. And consequently, Air India reacted for obvious reasons, because they really don't want to go on the wrong foot at any point in time. So they've
They grounded
reacted.
the plane. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably what has happened. But again, until they report it and demand an investigation, or someone submits a formal report detailing the chain of events, it's very difficult for us to decipher exactly how this has panned out. But like I said, as far as the pilot is concerned, while I perfectly respect this view that maybe this should have been investigated in London itself. There is, like I said, there is this sequence of 6 actions that have to happen before the switch goes from cutoff to run to cutoff. And what seems to have happened is a failure in just one of those steps. And once the lock engaged, the pilot would have probably deemed it safe to continue the flight. So I would probably give him the benefit of doubt on that.
I think that's
Now, the
fair.
other point
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Barkha.
No, I was just going to say, what are the implications? Because it's in the shadow of AI 171, because it seems to hold this parallel, what is the implication for that investigation?
Correct. Yeah. So look, I mean, that's still ongoing, obviously. But I think the one thing that you noticed again, I mean, I think we should remind our viewers from the report, the preliminary report, the word that was used was transition.
Yeah.
And I think I could be wrong again, gentlemen, but I think the word transition was almost an implicit acknowledgement that they weren't sure if it was a movement that was recorded, possibly as like a false positive, or whether it was a genuine mechanical movement that was correctly recorded as a movement. And to that extent, I think they were not sure themselves whether it's actually a mechanical movement that's been registered correctly, or a transition that has been accomplished by software or because of a fault, but not really a mechanical movement. And to that extent, the word transition was used.
Yeah, I
So-
think let me bring in Captain Randhawa on this. I think the problem, Aditya, is that while the preliminary report did not specify and therefore use this passive word called transition, it then followed it up with two sentences that purportedly referred to a cockpit conversation without producing a transcript of that conversation, which has led to speculation in sections of media, particularly in the West, that this was a deliberate act by the pilot. Now, before I come to Captain Randhawa, I met with the father of Sumit some weeks ago. This is his only interview to date. And one of the things that he disclosed, and Captain Randhawa has shared this also, is that when members of this AAIB came to meet him, they came to meet him on the pretext of offering condolences. So he agreed to meet them. And then when they met him, they effectively blamed his son for taking the plane down. And that's when he got very, very agitated, very, very upset, and he decided to become a co-petitioner with the FIP in the Supreme Court. I'm just going to play out that clip and come right back to you, Captain Randhawa. Take a look.
Two people came to condole
From the probe panel.
probe panel. They
Yes.
said that we are the investigators.
Yes.
But while talking and all that, this we are sharing and we are doing this thing and all that. But suddenly, one of them said that he had a suicidal tendency. This had hurt me like hell. I told him that he was a professional pilot and a well experienced, and he knew his job very well,
Yes.
and it is incorrect. I do not know what a man can do in that few seconds, less than 10 seconds, what he did. Because as the profile of the flight, which was shown on TV, I feel it was a balanced flight till lost.
Yeah.
But here the words, there is no thrust and I'm sinking, or something like that, I'm losing height.
Yeah, because we don't have the exact transcript.
So that was visible, and this mayday he has said.
Yes.
And nobody gave them, actually they should give the CVR report, cockpit voice recorder report. Then flight data recorders are there. Everything can come perfectly well.
Yeah.
Why they are hiding? The thing is, why they are hiding it?
Right. And so, he said very movingly that it hurt him like hell. And that's why, Captain Randhawa, he decided to fight alongside you in the Supreme Court. In the light of what has been recorded by the pilot on this flight, irrespective of, your point that he should have had it investigated in London, how does this change your argument before the Supreme Court? And how do you think it should change the AAIB's probe?
See, first and foremost thing I would like to bring out is what Panikkar and Aditya have shared, that it is a total mechanical movement. I bought out the incident at Osaka. So I want to ask both these gentlemen, if it was a mechanical lock, then how did the fuel control switches moved in an uncommanded movement into cutoff position? Because that is basically on that point we are fighting in the Supreme Court also. We've given the argument that there is an electrical problem. Now, as per both these gentlemen, they are saying it is mechanical. It's a mechanical lock. Whereas I'm saying it's an electromechanical lock. And second point is, which you rightly said, how does yesterday the incident be reflected in the Supreme Court? I have already forwarded the details to my solicitor to be put in the argument in the Supreme Court. The case has been preponed from March to 11th of February this month. So this is a blessing in disguise. Of course, we fought for it and we got the date earlier. And we are going to use this yesterday's incident, which happened on the 787-800 aircraft at Heathrow, and going to be used as an evidence in the case that this is the third time there has been an uncommanded movement of these field control switches. So it carries a lot of weight, and we are sure that the court is going to admit these points which are being highlighted now. And I'm very happy that the media has picked it up all around, and we gave a press statement from the FIP, and we are fighting tooth and nail, and we are very sure that there was no pilot error in case of Air India 171 crash. And this is being used as a bogey by the AIB, and they were heading towards that, and they would be shaken up by what has happened yesterday. Barkha.
Yeah, so let me bring in Captain Panikkar now. Captain Panikkar, Captain Randhawa says this is going to come before the Supreme Court, the third time that there has been uncommanded movements of the switches. How do you see this changing the course of the investigation? Captain Panikkar?
Yeah,
Yes.
let me just counter Captain Randhawa. As far as the electromechanical part of the switch is concerned, okay, let's just specifically refer to the ANA incident. Now, the FADEC, as per the book, is supposed to operate to cut off the engines only on the ground. Okay?
Yeah.
This is the design philosophy. What happened in the ANA case was a premature movement of the thrust reversers before the aircraft had touched down, which gave as part of the inputs to the FADEC that the aircraft is on the ground before the actual touchdown. And this has led, again, via a malfunction, to both the engines being cut off via the FADEC.
Yeah.
Okay. The design of the aircraft, of the FADEC, is to intervene only on the ground. However, if there are some inputs which come to the FADEC indicating that the aircraft is on the ground via a malfunction or otherwise, the FADEC could still believe that it is authorized to cut off a particular engine or both the engines in the air. Am I clear on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, kind of. Yeah.
Okay. No, basically what I'm trying to say is that if the FADEC has cut off the engines while it is in the air, it is a malfunction. Whether it be software driven or whether it be a cascading system of failures, electronic/electrical failures, which have led to this, besides the point. The design of the system is to intervene only on the ground. The FADEC cutoff is only on the ground. That's how it is designed. If it is done elsewhere, it is because of a malfunction, whether it be because of cascading failures, electronic failures, something happening, something not happening, etc., etc. Coming back to the point, what you had just mentioned, it will have serious implications. And the serious implications being like what all of us have been saying right from the word go. It is not a simple thing that the pilot decides one fine day, okay, today is a good day to switch off the engine, and I do it. There are 10,000 flights happening every day. If you're going to attribute all this that, oh, let's close it because the pilot is done. No. We are trying to say that there are a lot of other things which need to be investigated, which need to be looked into.
Can I ask you something? When the 737 MAX second crash takes place. The first one, the Lion Air, is blamed on the pilot. The second one, the Ethiopian Air, leads to the discovery of the software problem, the MCAS. And then for a period of time, the 737 MAXs are grounded. Now, there are 1,200 of these Dreamliners operational around the world. There are those who believe it's not practical to ground them. There are those who believe that they must be grounded in the way that 737 were grounded till the problem was fixed. Which side of the debate do you weigh in on? Especially because we don't have an acknowledgement from Boeing that there could be a problem. The preliminary probe report gave a clean chit to the manufacturer. Now, in the light of whatever's happened on this London-Bangalore flight, which side of the debate do you weigh in on?
Okay. When Air India 171 happened, I was sitting in Vienna. I was waiting for a Dreamliner to come from Delhi to Vienna and for me to operate from Vienna to Washington. At the time at which it happened, nobody really knew what had happened. But in the wisdom of hindsight, if there is an unexplained incident of a simultaneous failure of both engines immediately after takeoff, I would be very worried. Please realize, Barkha, that the MAX accident, had it happened, God forbid, in the United States, instead of happening in Southeast Asia, things would have been very different. Had that second incident happened in the United States, instead of Ethiopia, things would have been very, very different. Okay?
I agree.
Because clearly in the case of MCAS was miscommunication. The pilots were simply not aware that this is the action required to be taken. There was no communication by Boeing that a new system has been involved and it would override everything and force the aircraft's nose down for a period of 6 to 7 seconds in what it believed was uninstalling the aircraft and coming into a safe recovery. In fact, if you remember, media reports at that particular point in time had implications that the pilot is poorly trained. He's an Indian. Perhaps he does not know this. Perhaps he does not know that. Western noses were looking down upon us as to, questioning our competency and our capability of flying and our understanding the system. It's only after the Ethiopian crash, like you correctly pointed out, that aircraft were grounded, investigations carried out, and found that there was grave lacunae in the communication system itself. That people were simply not aware, and more important, people are not trained as to what it was. And a systemic failure in the 737 in that it relied upon the input from a single sensor. Unlike the 787, which has multiple sensors, and the system decides as to which input is valid or is not valid. In the case of the 737, it just relied upon a single input. And if that sensor said that something is wrong, the system reacted that way.
Okay. So therefore now to my specific question, are you in favor of grounding for this moment or not in favor of grounding? And I want the same question to Aditya and Captain Randhava. Captain Panikkar, briefly. Look at the financial implications. I'm taking a minute to digress, and I've said this on your channel before. Boeing stands to lose $500 million every day if the Dreamliners are grounded. It is not a question that should be taken lightly. And I'm not just saying lives versus non-lives. This aircraft has had a safety record for 12 years without any problem, apart from the few lithium-ion batteries in the initial teething stages. It is not a question that I take lightly. But I'm saying that you should check this out, take serious cognizance of it, take this far more seriously than Boeing seems to have been taking it at this particular point in time, and then take a considered decision. It is not a simple question like ground everything. It's not a knee-jerk reaction. It is something that you have to consider carefully and take an evaluated call as to whether it should be grounded, should not be grounded. Okay, Aditya, do you want to weigh in on that? Professor Aditya Parajpai?
Yeah. Okay. So, So let me start off with the thing about Osaka, which Captain Randhava asked. So first off, with Osaka, I agree. Based on whatever I've been able to see so far, it seems to be a failure of the thrust control malfunction adjustment system, or the accommodation system, I'm sorry. But what's interesting is, I don't know, Captain Panikkar, but I have not been able to find the final investigation report for that event. So we don't actually have a clear final word from JTSB. At least I couldn't find the report. So we're going on what's out there. Now, I also want to, it's probably worth mentioning because I also had to look at the patent that was filed for the TCMA. The TCMA as a system, the thrust control malfunction adjustment or accommodation system, I'm sorry, is meant to prevent high thrust episodes at multiple points of time in the flight envelope, not just on the ground, but even after the plane lifts off. If you're in a high thrust climb, it can sometimes be deleterious. So even at that point, it's meant to pull the thrust down depending on how it perceives the flight condition to be. So yeah, so to add to your question now, Barkha, about the grounding of the Dreamliners, I'm inclined to agree with Captain Panikar that it has to be a considered decision. I mean, the financial implications, not just for Boeing, but also for the number of airlines that operate the 787 are massive. I've also said this earlier that the plane has had an excellent safety record, but at the same time, we don't know what's gone wrong with Air India. So certainly, it has to be taken seriously. And also, honestly, a lot of these things have to be modeled now. See, one thing that happens with some of these aircraft, given just how complex they are, is that you occasionally have these isolated failure modes. Look at BA Flight 38, which had a dual engine failure on approach to Heathrow, but thankfully everybody survived. It was literally a point failure in that you had a specific flight condition, the low temperature at high altitudes, the specific way in which the aircraft responded to turbulence close to approach. That entire combination of events caused a failure, and it was a single point. They struggled to replicate it until the very end of that investigation. So even as you think of taking AI 171 seriously, the thought has to be, look, we generally don't expect this to fail. Could this be a point failure that has
and I would agree with that if it were not for the uncanny, repetitive, quality to this episode on the 1st of February, Aditya. I would agree with that. But if there is a slippage for whatever reason in the fuel control switches, then that is something that certainly should be looked at, not just by Air India 787.
Certainly.
It has to be looked at all across the 1,200 operating Dreamliners. I do have to close. I have to give the last word to Captain Randhawa. Sharath, you had a brief interjection. Captain Panikar.
Yeah, yes. just a small correction for Aditya.
Yeah.
In the air, the TCMA cannot switch off. The FADEC or the TCMA cannot switch off the engine. It can only bring the thrust back. So that initial statement is still correct. That is designed to function to switch off only on the ground.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, Captain Randhawa, in terms of responses that you would be looking for from AAIB, from DGCA, from Civil Aviation Ministry, like what next in terms of the AI 171 probe?
Now, as far as the AI 171 probe, I again reiterate, there has been no investigation on the electrical systems. Captain Panikar and Aditya are still unaware. There have been multiple problems with the 787 right from the day it manufactured. I was one of the first persons to be converted onto 787 aircraft. And I would tell you one thing, that from the beginning, it started with lithium batteries. It kept having problems with the electrical systems. There have been n number of cases where the electronic bay has been having seepage of water drainage from the toilet in front lavatory and the front galley from the drainage system.
There was an FAA directive on this,
Captain
which we have also.
forgot to tell you that if he was operating from Vienna to Washington, what happened on the same day when the flight was also starting up from Vienna to Delhi? The electronic bay was totally flooded with water. I don't know whether Air India reported that matter to DGCA, and the aircraft was declared AOG. That was a fast reaction by the Austrian flight engineer, who immediately deplaned all the passengers, thinking of there could be an electrical short circuit. Now, as far as AI 171 goes, we are very confident that if the investigations are carried out properly and the electrical systems are also looked into, and then they should come to a conclusion. The second point is, yesterday's incident cannot be taken lightly. There is a need by the Boeing company all around the world to carry out these checks because it is happening. Are we waiting for another accident to happen? What happened in case of a 737 MAX? We waited for a second accident to happen, and then we declared that, okay, pilot is not responsible.
Yeah.
When they fitted
Yeah.
the MCAS system. So I would like to again reiterate that there has to be a proper mechanism in which the investigations are being carried out. I do not know if there are proper SMEs of engineering on board this investigation, because at present the 5 members of the AIB, they lack the expertise as far as 787 aircraft is concerned. So I would like to at the end state, we are waiting. If nothing is going to come out from AIB, we are again in the Supreme Court, and we hope that the judiciary acts prudently and comes in our favor and ensures that there is transparency and accountability, which will happen if the judicial probe is agreed by the Supreme Court.
All right, we leave it there. I think those that chilling last warning. Are we waiting for another disaster to take place? Let it not be like the 737 MAX, where it took a second accident for Boeing to acknowledge its mea culpa. Certainly, I would be waiting for a statement from Boeing or even for the FAA to issue another directive for all of these tests to be conducted worldwide. I think that is the least or the minimum that we can be expecting. Thank you so much, Captain Panikkar, Professor Parajpai, and to Captain Randhawa. And to our audience, we have always promised that we will follow every single development since the crash. And I think we have tried our best to do that. Do keep writing in with your inputs. Many of you write in from across the world. Some of you are amateur aviation geeks. Some of you are highly trained. We value and read every single response we get. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And to our audience, thank you. See you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.